This program is a paid commercial announcement and in no way represents the views of WPHT or its management.
Now on Talk Radio 1210, WPHT, WPHT HD, WOGL HD3 Philadelphia. Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor.
If we don't move in our own direction, we're going to become extinct. In fact, in some cases, we're close to being extinct right now.
Presented by Weinerman Pain and Wellness, serious doctors for serious injuries, and powered by the law offices of Pond, Lehocky, Stern, Giordano. Talk, listen, and speak to the region's most influential leaders. It's Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor.
Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor on Talk Radio 1210. WPHT, we begin our live broadcast tonight here in the city of brotherly love with chaos in London as panic and fear on a Saturday night from an apparent terrorist attack plays out and unfolds. Stay tuned at the top of the hour with the Dan Loney Show. More on the chaos going on in London. Good evening, everybody, and that's a tough transition, J-Doc, to make from that story into Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor, but glad to bring in and into the big chair and welcome into Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor and Ryan Boyer joining us in the studio tonight. Ryan, welcome in, brother. You're in different waters tonight, man. How are you?
Yes, I'm great. I'm in different waters, but you guys look like you're duck swimming because you have all this food around here. And when a guy can't eat, it's hard to be around all this food. But
and that's why I'm eating for you tonight, right?
Yeah, thank you. Eat for me, Joe.
Well, good stuff. As you know, Ryan, and just a little bit of our show prep leading up to the broadcast and leading into our Saturday night, we always begin going back to when we started here on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT with Johnny Doc back in February. We always started with our dinner entree for the show.
Well, the dinner entrees today is a multiple entree. You can pick. It's a smorgasbord. You have the biggest stromboli I've ever seen.
It is. J-Doc, I mean, absolute largest stromboli I've ever seen.
What we have tonight is my favorite place in the world, Frank's Pizza, from my home area of East Falls. It's a hidden gem in the city of Philadelphia. You're right, Ryan. Biggest stromboli, cheesesteak stromboli ever. And a little shout out to the owner, Joe Strafus, Big Joe, and Derek Keogh, the whole gang, man.
Hey,
Unbelievable.
Hey, Big Joe at Frank's. Can I let you know?
But by the way, Big Joe was he's about 6'8", and when
he's really Big Joe.
Oh yeah,
he's not one of those Big Joes that's about 5'6".
No, like tiny. No,
yeah.
Terrell Owens, when he came to Philly, Big Joe was his bodyguard. That's how big Joe is.
Well, I'm going to let Big Joe know up at Frank's. First of all, I want to thank Frank's for, as Ryan said, sending in an incredible spread.
Woo.
Then I want to let everybody know I didn't even get an opportunity to sample the food
I'm
because
doing it
I
for
don't
you.
eat, J-Doc. You know I don't eat until after the broadcast. Everything wiped out. Good stuff tonight.
Well, I want to thank everybody. I'm excited. I mean, it's unbelievable. I don't know how I'm going through this show tonight.
And we even got you to use a napkin tonight, J-Doc. Look at it.
Because it's your first show tonight, Ryan. It's for you, and because the councilman's here with us. Couldn't be happier, man. Great food, man. Unbelievable.
That's Frank's Pizza in J-Doc's neighborhood.
East Falls, pal.
If J-Doc's in the store when you happen to pop in, say hello to J-Doc. It's Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor, presented by Weinerman Pain and Wellness. Serious doctors for serious injuries. We're powered and fueled by Pond, Lehocky, Stern, Giordano, who we did that special show with Sam Pond a few weeks ago. That was a great segment, or a great 1 hour special with Sam Pond, and we thank Sam Pond, by the way, who delivered food from the saloon. So we had two different types of appetizers.
But all top shelf.
All top shelf stuff. Frank's in the saloon. Ryan Boyer, the business manager of Labor Districts Council. Ryan, let me give you first, before we set the table for the big show, and we are loaded tonight. Let me give you 60 seconds to welcome in the city of Philadelphia to your world. This is a different audience for you, and I want to give you a chance to welcome everybody on board.
Yes, this is a big difference from the audience that I usually talk to. But, this is the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection, as my wife would always tell me.
Absolutely.
And I just want to let people know that I'm a lifelong Philadelphian. I love Philadelphia, and I'm passionate about Philadelphia. And I want to just give a My prayers goes out to Johnny Dock and his family at the hospital with his wife Celie, and also my prayer goes out to the family of Amina Young, the former president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Convention Center and current member of the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board, who passed last night. And just two great people, Celia Doherty and Amina Young. And, you know, my roots run deep in Philadelphia. I played in that Roxborough Roman game.
Did you
Joe.
really?
Absolutely.
Oh, I didn't know that.
4 straight years I played in the Roxborough Roman
Did you really?
game.
Me too. Oh, my God.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm a Philadelphian. I love Philadelphia. I'm passionate about cheerleading Philadelphia wherever I go. And I just hope that the listeners are open-minded about my opinions, because I am not shy. I believe that you have a point of view. You should say your point of view.
Absolutely,
Well,
man.
good stuff. We welcome Ryan Boyer into the big chair. We welcome him into Talk Radio 1210 WPHT here tonight with his boys. So we welcome them as well. We welcome your family, and we welcome everyone in. We'll deal with the Dallas stuff much later on. We won't
So we're going to deal with Dallas.
tonight, but we'll deal with
and
that
now I
much
find it
later on.
now. So I'm a Roman guy, and Ryan's a Roxborough guy. That's our
I'm an
Thanksgiving.
Indian for life, man.
And I'm a Cahillite. Big Daddy.
Cahillite.
All right,
What is
All
a
right.
Cahillite? They made it up, you know?
Let me
I know. I'll get back to you on that one.
Let me set the table, J. Doc, for our big show tonight. To our left and in studio is City Councilman at Large, David O. And David, I am thrilled to be able to say, as we introduce you and bring you into the big show here on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT, I'm glad you're here. Welcome to the studio, and welcome and thanks for coming in.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me on, and believe me, I'm happy to be here too.
I'll bet you are. And David, let me say this. We couldn't be happier. And if anybody doesn't know David, he's one of the greatest guys you'll ever meet in your entire life. And let me say this, Dave. I want to thank God that you're okay, because let me tell you something. I can't say enough good. I've known David for many years, and when I found out about it, my wife yelled down, "Turn the news on." And of course, you know, just devastation and all those things. And so, David, we're so happy to have you here in the studio for many reasons.
David, let me ask you, if you will,
Yeah, sure.
share with our audience, if you could relive the moment, if you can relive what happened for the audience.
Yeah, sure. I mean, cut me off when I'm taking too long. I mean, basically, I was coming home. It was late. I had come from a meeting. And during the day, we had visitors from the Republic of Georgia, and they had also given me a little gift bag of tourism books and a bottle of Georgian wine. So I had my arms full, my hands full, my shoulders full. And as I was, parking my car, I saw what appeared to be someone passing my car who was a friend of my neighbor. That's what my impression was. And so I thought nothing of him. I went to my car, took out my stuff, saw him walk by, seemed like a normal person, nodded at him. And when I closed the back of my SUV and turned around, there he was. And he had a completely different expression on his face, like a sense of urgency. And so, you know, he was saying something, I couldn't hear him. I couldn't understand him. And I just said, what? You know, trying to understand what he was saying. And at some point in time, you know, with intensity, as he was getting more loud, he was saying, the keys, the car, give me the keys, give me the car. And so, you know, it didn't occur to me that this was, he wanted it, other than I thought, well, maybe there was an accident, he needed something from me. Yeah.
There was some familiarity there, because you've been living in that neighborhood for quite some time.
Yeah.
And when I heard the neighborhood, I know the neighborhood, I said, David is really who he says he is. I mean, I know you from being out, but
Right.
you're a real neighborhood guy. So how did your family take that? I know you're a tough guy. You've been in the military. You understand hand-to-hand combat. But how did your family take it?
Well, my family, of course, they only saw the blood. They were just very, very concerned. My wife was very upset, and just like everybody else, it was a serious matter. I went to the hospital. I was stabbed in the left side, and the blade pierced my diaphragm, and they had to do surgery, and so there was a lot of concern. But fortunately, as it turned out, I'm fine.
Well, your colleagues on city council, particularly President Clark, took a very strong and courageous stand about the violence epidemic that's going on in Philadelphia, and he said it must stop and people must cooperate with the police. So do you think that your getting stabbed can be the impetus for communities to rise up against these bad actors in our neighborhoods?
Well, I hope so in an intelligent manner. It's a, as you know, a very difficult problem. So we want to provide a peaceful, safe community, of course, and especially for innocent people and everybody else. But at the same time, we have been losing an effective battle against curbing violent crime, and so we have to do it in a smart way.
David, so that happened to you, and if it can happen to a city councilman, you can see that it can happen to anybody.
Sure, it can happen to anybody.
The experience, and I know it had to be not only shocking, but tell me, does it give you a different perspective on because you were a victim?
Well, to be honest, it doesn't give me a different perspective. I've had that perspective. As Ryan said, I've lived there for 54 years, and I've had other experiences. But it is certainly something that tells me that with all the support that I have right now from the community, it's a good time to focus on moving forward in addressing the underlying issues involving crime, as well as providing safety to our community and a new sense of confidence that people will be safe walking around and living in our city.
City Councilman David O. Joining us here on Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor and Ryan Boyer in the big chair here on a Saturday night as we come to you on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. Still to come also on the big show, and we'll have Councilman O with us for the entire live broadcast. Larry Krasner will join us as well, the Democratic candidate, J-Doc, for the DA's office. Timely conversation we'll have with Larry tonight as we roll on here on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT.
Original news stories, podcasts, columns from your favorite hosts, and more. Interact 24/7 at Facebook.com/1210WPHT.
I won't participate on behalf of ourselves here at Local 98 or the Philadelphia Building Trades in conversations that are purely dominated on social issues that don't affect our jobs.
He kind of punched me, and I knew that that's a weird punch. And the way he punched me, I said, "You just stabbed me?" And he had. And I looked and I saw the weapon. My concern is this: he's a guy who stabs first and then takes, and I just think that's a very dangerous kind of person.
Back here live on Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor and Ryan Boyer in the big chair on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. City Councilman at Large, Councilman David O. Joining J-Doc and Krause here in the studio as well. We're presented by Weinerman Pain and Wellness, serious doctors for serious injuries, J-Doc, and glad to be here with Councilman O in the studio.
I was amazed, David, because when I heard you talking about the situation, you were concerned about the individual when now thank God he's in custody, but
right.
when he was not in custody, your concern was for the community.
Yes.
You said and I read that in the paper, and I'm like, my God, what? Elaborate, please.
Yeah. Basically, my concern is, as I said in the clip, it wasn't a transactional crime. Give me your wallet or you're going to get hurt. It was more like I want, and then I stab you, and then I take from you. And so my concern was for the community. And, fortunately, he's turned himself in, so he's not hurt. He's in, and we'll go through the judicial process now.
I mean, that lets us know we have to focus on mental health, because a lot of that seems like he had some mental health issues.
Yeah, there was something definitely challenging about him, and that's why it was hard for me to even understand really what did he want, what he's trying to communicate.
And before you go into, because I know we have a car, what was amazing to me, David, was that your quote was you had no ill will towards the individual.
Yeah, I truly don't, and I think it's a good way to be.
Okay.
We transition out of our conversation with Councilman David O., who will be with us here in the 1210 studios. We go to the hotline, and we welcome in the Democratic candidate for the DA's office, and we welcome Larry Krasner into Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor and Ryan Boyer. Larry, thanks for joining us on a Saturday night in Philadelphia.
How are you, Larry? Thanks for joining us, and congratulations on your historic landslide victory with all those candidates, man. That was a landslide, so congratulations.
Well, I appreciate those kind words.
Larry, go ahead, Ryan.
I was going to say, Larry, you had the historic victory. You had a very distinguished career as a civil rights attorney. What do you think your number one challenge is going to be at the district attorney's office?
The number one challenge is to change culture. You know, in every type of government, every type of organization, there come times when things need to change. Doesn't mean the people there are terrible people. Doesn't mean they weren't trying to do the best they could. But, you know, not everything works out, and there has to be a cultural change within the office so that it goes a different direction.
Larry, it's J. Doc.
How do you do that, Larry? By the way, how do you start that process? You don't change culture overnight. It needs a starting point. What is it, or what will it be?
Well, you know, there's a few things. There are things that you can do quickly. You can fairly quickly stop seeking death penalty. You can fairly quickly move in the direction against mass incarceration. But in any situation where there is cultural change, you need to make sure that the people who are in supervisory positions share your vision, share your ethics, share your values. Because, you know, in an office of 600 people with 300 attorneys, it's not as if the district attorney can be in everybody's files and in everybody's office all the time. So it begins with having the right people in the office at every level, but most importantly, it begins with having the right supervisors and the right structure to make sure that we're all moving in the same direction.
Right now, Larry, it's J. Doc. My question is, obviously, this is a sensitive time at the DA's office. Morale is not at an all-time high, to say the least. And you have been on the other side of the table, and now you're going to potentially be the top guy. How are you going to change that morale in the department?
Well, I understand, and frankly, I feel for a lot of the good people in the DA's office because, they're not liars. They're not cheats. They're not people who are on the make and trying to make money on the side in ways that are improper. And unfortunately, some of the revelations about Seth Williams are very troubling, and they cause all of them to feel like they have been painted with his brush. So, some of the things you do are just very straightforward. You have to do the right thing. I mean, it's what you're supposed to do. You just do what you're supposed to do. You don't take free roofs. You don't take gifts. You don't get free tickets. You don't get free sofas. You don't get free trips in Jaguars. You don't do that stuff. You start with that. You make sure that it is well understood throughout the office that no one does that. You try to make sure that there is no suggestion of impropriety in terms of how cases are handled. There's not favoritism because you're rich. There's not favoritism because you're white. There's not favoritism for any reason. You have to try to be as completely even-handed as possible, and even do so when you may not realize your own biases. You got to step in early and try to evaluate the biases that do exist in institutions like that, try to correct them. So, I think when you start off on the right foot like that, and you set a tone, people start to feel like they are, again, part of something that they believe in. They have someone who's in the top position who is, like them, imperfect, but is going to try to do the right thing when these issues present.
And Larry, part of the success or failure of the district attorney is the respect or lack thereof that the community has with the police department. So I loved your statement. You said, I met with Richie Ross. He runs the police department, not McNesby. I agree with that. But how do we bring the trust of the police department back to the communities so that we can have some cooperation, so we can actually solve some of these heinous crimes out here and actually, make a dent so that we can get the bad people off the streets and keep the innocent people away from that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I also think that you're identifying exactly where some of the problems in solving crimes originate. They originate with the fact that there is a division and a separation and a distrust between communities and the officers who are supposed to protect those communities. And I don't say that to say that either the community is all bad or the police officers are all bad. I don't believe either one of those things. But there are certain things that have been done, like illegal stop and frisk, that for well over a decade has been alienating young African-American men from police officers. And very often the police officers don't even want to do it. It's just people like Rudy Giuliani shoving it down their throats, making them do it. What we find based upon illegal stop and frisk is they only find a gun 1 out of every 400 times. They only find anything, and anything might just be a little bag of weed, 1 out of 50 times. So every time you go through this exercise of stopping young men because they're poor and probably black or brown, you're alienating 49 for the one who has something and the 1 in 400 who has a gun. It means that good people in those neighborhoods may not want to become police officers. It means good people in those neighborhoods humiliated and mistreated may not provide that information. Step one is you stop illegal stop and frisk. But there are many other levels to this. We need to bring the police closer to these communities. There needs to be reconciliation. We need to push away the divisions that have existed. And one thing that I believe will help, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back because I don't really see this as being about me too much, but, having a DA who has respect for civil rights and has shown that over his career, it does two things. It gets a lot of votes in the black community, which has been most unfairly affected by violations of civil rights, but it also brings about a little bit of trust, where some people in those communities who have viewed the prosecution fairly or unfairly as being completely against them can imagine a world where the prosecution is actually trying to be even-handed and fair, trying to make sure that if somebody gets convicted, that person is also actually the doer and not just the guy who got convicted. So I'm hoping that will have a little bit of an impact. But look, my ears are open. I'm wide open to all the good ideas I can get from clergy and from people in those communities. And I say that sincerely, from activists, from community leaders, from block captains. I want to hear what all of them have to say, and I want to help get it done.
Larry Krasner, the Democratic candidate for the DA's office, joining us here on Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor and Ryan Boyer in the big chair, along with J. Duck. Also, Councilman David O. Joining us here in the studio. Larry, we're going to take a short commercial break. We hope that you can stay with us and join us for one more block coming out of the commercial break. We'll continue our conversation with Larry Krasner back here on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT.
Radio.com. Radio.com.
I believe there's room, for the national building trades, the local building trades, to have partnerships with the Trump administration as it pertains to energy, as it pertains to infrastructure, as it pertains to the undocumented worker.
Presented by Weinerman Pain and Wellness, Serious Doctors for Serious Injuries, powered by Pond Lahaki, Stern, and Giordano. Welcome back to Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor and Ryan Boyer in the big chair as we broadcast to you live on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. We do the broadcast here live in Philadelphia with a heavy heart as we watch for the details about the panic and fear unfolding on this Saturday night, that chaos over on London, an apparent terrorist attack. More coming up at the top of the hour when Dan Loney takes over from 8 to 11 right here on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT.
So, Larry, thank you for staying with us through the break. And we're going to bring David O into the conversation. But first, I would like to ask you a question. What could you do to alleviate some of the concern that victims groups had that you've never been a prosecutor before and that maybe you may not have sufficient concern for victims of crime? And I think this is a great time to bring David in, being a current victim of crime. But what could you say to those groups, Larry?
Well, while a lot of my work is well known, what's less well known is the victims I have represented, and I have represented for many years. And so as I have conversations with these victims groups, once they know that, frankly, they have a very different view of it. I mean, for example, right now, my law firm is representing a young girl who is a victim of rape. And while the prosecutor got some years against an older male relative who did this to her, they didn't take care of her in terms of preventing him from trying to quickly sell his house and disperse the money among other family members so that she wouldn't have it available for her treatment. Prosecutor did not protect her in that regard, but my law firm did, okay? And that is not an isolated incident. We have protected victims of sexual harassment. I personally represented some corrections officers in Philadelphia County who were sexually harassed in pretty serious ways on the job. I've gone to court representing victims when they felt like they weren't going to get fair treatment in other situations involving sexual harassment and sexual offense crimes because the perpetrator was actually familiar with a lot of judges and successfully represented them there. So I do actually have a very long record of representing victims. I have been a victim myself. I was cut across the head with a blade I never saw. Probably not as seriously as Councilman O.
Well, the councilman is here now, and I think that the councilman, this is a great time to ask the question, Councilman, that you want to ask. Go ahead.
Well, let me say, first of all, I do know Larry, and I've referred cases to him. I have a lot of respect for him. So it's good to talk to you, Larry.
Good talk to you too, Councilman.
All right, and so everyone knows that I'm a former prosecutor, and so let me ask you this: that as you take, as you go into the general election, and as you move forward into presenting to the voters how you're going to run the office itself, in terms of what its function is, which is to prosecute. And not to persecute, but to prosecute. How will you ensure that you have the level of capable, enthusiastic, energetic prosecutors that basically make up that office and serve the public?
Well, first of all, there's already a steady stream of people who are ex-prosecutors, and some of them very experienced in New York, in Philadelphia, and elsewhere, but who have been out in private practice for some period of time. They've been on both sides of this coin. Some of them are incredibly qualified, but they also share a vision of a world where you make sure innocent people don't sit in the jail cell for 25 years while the guilty one goes free, because the emphasis was on convictions, not on getting it right. So you have those folks. You also have something which, frankly, doesn't surprise me, but it surprises a lot of people, which is that there's national interest in this particular race, because it is unusual to have a truly progressive attorney with a civil rights background taking over a prosecutor's office. So there is also a pretty steady stream of interest coming from, mid-career professionals in other cities now. So we're going to have a tremendous pool of talent. I mean, I even received an email from the woman, African-American woman, who is the first African-American editor of the Harvard Law Review in its history. This is someone who could well be another Barack Obama, could well be on the United States Supreme Court, but she's emailing me, and she's emailing me to support what's happening down here. So we're going to have a tremendous pool of talent to pull from. People who are incredibly capable but didn't want to work in a DA's office with that old culture are very interested in working in a DA's office with the new culture. And I think that'll be a big part of it, Councilman.
Larry, I have a question for you about your relationship with the police. We started off talking about we started off talking about it a little bit, but after your landslide victory, there were some supporters that were blank the FOP, and that caused a lot of issues. And we know who the chief of police is, but John McNesby does represent a lot of individuals that support him, and so
about half the department,
right? And so
the other half don't like him.
Okay, but my point is, half the department's out there, in the face and fighting crime, and my point is. They work directly with the DA's office. How are you going to address that situation so everybody's on the same team?
Well, I don't, based upon the meeting that John McNesby had with me and with Congressman Brady a couple of days ago, I don't really think there is a problem. So there was a fair amount of misunderstanding on the part of the FOP, and I'm not blaming them, but it was a misunderstanding about what actually happened. What actually happened is a few people, when I was not even in the building at this victory party, chanted F the FOP, and there was another chant, which, if I recall correctly, was something about how there's no good cops in a racist system or something like that. Those people were approached by my campaign employees and volunteers who asked them to stop, okay? None of those people chanting, by the way, were members of Black Lives Matter, all of whom didn't chant at all, except when everyone was chanting, this is what democracy looks like after the victory was final. That's what really happened, and that is something that the FOP and McNesby know now. John McNesby made it very clear to me when we met a couple of days ago that he thinks that police should be accountable just like everybody else, that he does not condone bad police behavior, and that he wants to move forward in a positive and constructive way. And I agree with him on those points.
Well, that's great. That's great to hear. Not all things about that district attorney's office was bad. And one of the things that Seth implemented was the community liaisons that came out to the communities and kind of, made relationships in the communities for the DA's office. Will that be an approach that you would try to replicate or keep some of the good stuff that was already there, like neighborhood-based prosecutions and things of that nature?
Well, first of all, I do think that Seth Williams did several good things in the office. I've never taken the position that in all aspects he was somehow a bad guy or he was bad at what he did. I consider him, aside from the issues involving his indictment, I consider him to be a big improvement over Lynn Abraham. I'd like to be a bigger improvement if possible. So I'm not someone who subscribes to the notion that everything there is bad. I've never said that. I do think that the zone system of prosecution is mostly good, and that it can be improved, but I think that was a good idea because it tends to build in relationships and intelligence about particular areas of the city with the same prosecutors and the same detectives. So, for example, when you start to see one block going to war against another block, or one gang going to war against another gang, it's easier to pick up on that reality and try to do things to intervene to stop that cycle which goes on. I do think that that's some good stuff. In terms of the relationship with the community, I think that's extremely important. This is a society that wants transparency. They want their transparency on the internet so they can see that you are actually doing what you said you were going to do with cases. And I mean, they want statistics on that. But they also want outreach, and they want connection, and they want the ability to have a connection to the DA's office. I think that's essential. I intend to do everything I can to make sure that continues.
Well, Larry, I really appreciate you for calling in and interrupting your Saturday night to call in on my maiden show. And I thank you, and I wish you the best of luck because this city needs it. We need a DA that's really doing a great job and really fair for everyone. And I think that you might be that person. Thank you, Larry. Appreciate you.
All right, bye-bye.
That's Larry Krasner, Democratic candidate for the DA's office, joining us here live on Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. Councilman David O. Before we go to break, I'll give you 45 seconds just as a follow or a comment or an exclamation point or a thought on the words of Larry Krasner.
Well, my perspective is that democracy is a great thing, and especially when you have different perspectives coming to it. I mean, we had different ideas in the Democratic primary, and now we are going to have some different ideas as we go into the general. Larry Krasner has presented a interesting, progressive point of view. Certainly, he's going to rely on a lot of new ideas. And then we're going to have Beth Grossman, who's a Republican. She also served in the DA's office, and she's going to come in and present some ideas that are more traditional, I think, but she's also challenged on how to be effective. And ultimately, the voters are going to have a chance to decide how they're going to see their community protected and made safe.
All right, good stuff. Well said, and a special thanks to Larry Krasner for being a part of the big show here on Saturday Night Live on PhillyLabor. Don't go anywhere. Don't leave us yet on this Saturday night as City Councilman at Large David O. will stay with us. We'll continue our conversation with him. We'll continue with a heavy heart for all of the chaos that's happening in London right now. And again, a special thanks, J-Doc, to Frank's Pizza.
Absolutely. In East Falls, baby. Unbelievable.
Big Joe. Nothing left in the studio. How does
Big
it
Joe
happen?
is all gone. It's evaporated, Big Joe.
I didn't get anything,
Before it even
J-Doc.
came in the door.
We roll to the commercial break. Back after this.
Rush.
Fearlessly leading conservatives.
Weekdays noon till 3 on Talk Radio 1210.
I've been coming out of step with them guys, okay? And I was a treasure of the Democratic Party. I've been a loyal Democrat my whole life. But I've told people, and it hasn't, like I told you, it just didn't resonate with this election. If you look at the last few years, I've been telling people we have to become a little bit more individual. We have to be more of our own brand. We have to do a better job at becoming a business.
The labor movement is the firewall between total greed in this country and having a decent middle class.
Back here live on Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor and Ryan Boyer in the big chair here on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT, presented by Weinerman Pain and Wellness, serious doctors for serious injuries. What is the difference between a Stromboli and a calzone? Go to Frank's Pizza. And you'll get the answer, right, J-Doc?
Absolutely.
Great stuff.
Get there
tonight.
before me because there won't be any left. Let me say this. It was cool listening to the quote from President Bloomingdale. We had the State of the Union show last week, and an hour with Rick Bloomingdale, and we had Wendell Young call in, and certainly it was an amazing segment, and we learned so much from him. I want to thank him for being our guest last week.
And more of that audio on the podcast page, J-Doc, as we continue and we roll on to push the message along on a Saturday night, on a beautiful Saturday night here in Philadelphia. City Councilman at Large David O. Very kind of you, sir, to join us for the entire hour of the big show tonight.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me here.
Well, we expected you probably would be here because you were in critical condition on Wednesday night in surgery and then on time for work on Friday. So,
yes.
I mean, my God.
He's a tough guy, Army tough.
That's right. Listen, and that's the thing. David's a major supporter of our armed forces, of our police, of victims' rights. And let's talk about victims' rights,
Sure.
David, and let's talk about solutions to situations like this. What does this incident happening to you, what does that do for your motivation and moving forward to make sure there are changes, and what are the solutions?
Well, the main thing that has happened in terms of how I've been impressed is just the outpouring of support. So many people sending support. I was really and am very surprised by it, very touched by it, and really challenged to do a better job for the people. And that's for everybody, from top to bottom. And so, when we look at the building blocks of what makes a safe community, we look at things like hopefulness, jobs, opportunity to fulfill yourself, and doing that right where you live. Education and training, of course, so important. But then you have to have a safe community. People have to be able to go outside, walk along, go to a place that's open late at night without fear of being attacked or harmed, things like that. And that helps people flourish and interact. That's about tolerance and interfacing. And so we need a good police force, an intelligent police force, doing the right thing and following the law. And then we need to have the prosecutors doing a good job and the defense attorneys being well equipped to defend the individuals. No one wants to have a system where innocent people are convicted of crimes. But at the same time, we have to have an intelligent process where people who are incarcerated are not just wasting away and becoming even worse than they were before. And so intelligence is important to our criminal justice system.
Councilman, it is fitting that my maiden show has a Republican on it, considering
Yes.
that we're on 1210, the Big Talker.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
You don't know what the heck's going on here, do you? Right?
No, but
He's going to wake up, he's pinching him right now.
I don't like the circumstances, but I like that you're here because I can ask you a question about bipartisanship at the state level.
Sure.
Because we don't get to where you want to go unless we have people willing to cross the aisle to solve really big problems, the big problems of school funding.
Yes.
But also the problems of change in the schools when you give the funding. What are you giving it for? And secondly, job training and good jobs. So what do you have to say about that? Who are we going to get at the state level to infuse Philadelphia and other cities of its kind so that we can get away from this violent culture?
Well, I think one of the things that we, at least in my humble opinion, one of the things we're challenged to do is to look at our leaders to come up with the solutions. The main thing a leader should do for the people that they lead is to come up with innovative, practical, true, tried solutions to bring new methods to solving tough problems. And I think at that point in time, you take a lot of the veneer off of things. You take a lot of the labels, a lot of the rhetoric out, and then you have people trying to solve problems that affect the people they represent. And that's when you can get people working together. A second thing we need to do is we need to have the voters who appreciate that, who appreciate people getting together, working things out, putting together the best things that they can, and being humble enough to adopt and take from some things that are proven to work best.
But it's difficult to do that when we appeal to the base level of the masses to win elections, right? Particularly primary elections are ran to the left on the Democratic side and to the right on the Republican side. And then how do you govern in the middle after you had all this red meat for the followers? So we have to figure that out. I think at the Philadelphia Building Trades, we have a great leader, and we figure that out every day. We're very bipartisan. We look at the problem and we look for solutions. We don't care if it's a Republican solution or a Democratic solution. We look for solutions to the problems, and our unions are a lot more like businesses today than they were in yesteryear, and we even need to do a better job of creating that business-friendly environment, and we're on our way to doing that.
All right, good stuff. I'll give you the last word, Councilman, before we say goodbye.
Well, I will say it's a challenge for everyone. If we don't as a nation, if we don't as a state, if we don't as a city do exactly that, work together to overcome what challenges we have when there are so many competitors out there, they're going to eat our lunch.
City Councilman at Large, David O., with us live in the studio for the entire big show. So nice to have you in the studio. Thank you so much.
Very much.
All right, stay in the good Lord's hands. Will
Yes,
you stay
I will.
blessed?
Thank you.
Ryan Boyer making his maiden voyage. J-Doc, I'll come to you in just a moment.
Please.
But Ryan, you made it through the first Saturday Night Live here on Talk Radio 1210.
First Saturday Night Live. I'll come back. I'll be back every week.
When you come back,
I will bring a lot of food. I will bring it from my place next week.
All right. We got some competition here, man.
Some competition. Now, you may have to eat some soul food.
I'm into it, brother. I'm into it.
I'm wearing a Kango, brother. No issues on this end. It's Saturday Night Live, welcoming Ryan Boyer, the business manager of Labor's District Council, here on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. J-Doc, I give you 45 to 60 seconds to kind of recap tonight's edition of Saturday Night Live.
I want to thank Frank's Pizza in East Falls, one of my favorite places on the planet for the food.
Shout out to Big Joe. Hey, Big Joe, I didn't get anything.
Listen, Joe Stravis, the owner, and the whole crew there. Awesome. I want to welcome Ryan Boyer on the program. Awesome to have you in the big chair, my friend.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to the future. Got a lot of great stuff coming, and I'm thankful to God to have our Councilman David O. here. A good friend. I've known him for years. Thank God he's okay, and we really appreciate you coming into the studio.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Good stuff. Also, special thanks to Larry Krasner, Democratic candidate for the DA's office, joining us here and part of the big show. Ryan, I give you, as we always do, when you sit in the big chair, you do get last word. So you get 45 seconds, my friend, just to put an exclamation point on tonight's maiden voyage.
Well, the maiden voyage was great, and I too thank Larry Krasner and Councilman O. And I thank you, Joe Crouch and Joe Doc, for welcoming me in and orchestrating this show with great precision. And I thank the Big Talker 1210 for inviting Labor on to give a counterbalance to what we hear here all day. But, we're one America, one country, one Philadelphia, and we're just looking for solutions to problems. We may look at it a different way, but we're all Americans.
All right, well done.
Well said.
Well done and well said. It's Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. We're presented by Weinerman Pain and Wellness, serious doctors for serious injuries. We're powered by Pond Lahaki, Stern, and Giordano. J-Doc, did you want to say something?
No, man, I just want to thank everybody for being on the show.
You interrupted me. I wasn't sure what you were doing.
I was looking at the rest of the Stromboli over there, Joe. Sorry about that.
Thanks. Special
He
thanks.
had dibs on it.
Yes, special thanks to Frank's Pizza. We thank Tony and John back in the studio for making it all happen. Stay tuned for the Dan Loney Show coming up on Saturday Night Live here on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. On behalf of J-Doc, on behalf of Ryan Boyer, on behalf of the Councilman, I'm Joe Krause. We'll see you next time.
I seen that open space. I hope you're saving that for medical marijuana because I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of that, and I just want to let you know, we're talking big numbers. We're talking, as you know, they're talking trillions, but we're talking mucho billions around here of unionized pension money. I haven't heard in 6 weeks one conversation about Russia yet. That's the reality. They come to me about jobs. They come to me a little bit about Obamacare, but they don't come to me about Russia. And with Philadelphia jumping out of the seams as a hospitality town, we need our transportation to be clean, efficient, safe, and on time.
This program is a paid commercial announcement and in no way represents the views of WPHT or its management.